So I work in energy for almost like 18 plus years now. I mean, I came to work as a physicist and engineer. My background was math physics. Then I did masters in geophysics. So I get to live with the oil price reality on day-to-day basis. So we are in an energy transition mode, but we have not yet replaced even the 2% of world energy needs.
Germany and the EU basically saying, well, we're out, renewables all the way. Like, what were they thinking, bro?
See, I get to be in meetings with like certain regulators, and we talk things. We try to be very realistic, like what is possible or not, but then you realize that certain thoughts are not welcome. Bringing supplies from Venezuela in a sustainable manner will take far longer than the current mess we have. In this mess, there are only two things that can help. You need immediate release on oil supplies from somewhere. And the only place that can do at this particular point is OPEC and primarily Saudi. So any discussion we are having about Iran or any discussion we are having about Venezuela, it is more a strategic move, in my opinion, to create pressure on OPEC. I mean, because when oil price is going up, the challenge is not the price, the challenge is the supply. Countries have to think that, okay, one thing is to having it costly, second is not to have it at all. There is nothing to stop until and unless there is an outside intervention. This is exactly what happened 2 years back when we went sub-zero, because literally there was nothing to stop that particular time. So same is valid for ceiling, that in short time it will keep shooting unless there is an intervention. At this particular point, all the evidence that we have is pretty much in the same direction, and there are three critical things. The first is, I mean, the way Russia is being disintegrated at this particular point from the energy system and economy, I think this is not something that you can sort it out very easily.
So, Sachin, welcome to the interview. I mean, everybody wants to have a piece of you right now, right? Everybody wants to know what's going on with the energy prices. We're literally flirting with 125, 130 crude. Do you think this is really kind of the peak of where it's going to get, or is just the beginning of quite a tough time for us?
No, I don't think it has peaked, Tom, because normally what happens is, like, when oil prices are in this extreme, what we call like 1.5 to sigma category, the move is pretty sharp, because a lot of people who are on futures in 10%, 20% margins, I mean, they are getting wiped out, called out pretty fast. So it moves pretty fast. There is nothing to stop until and unless there is an outside intervention. This is exactly what happened 2 years back when we went sub-zero, because literally there was nothing to stop that particular time. So same is valid for ceiling, that in short time it will keep shooting unless there is an intervention.
So you spent many years in this sector, so you've seen everything. You've seen the predictions of the $12, and then you've seen the negative rates. Now you've seen the 145s, which we had in 2008. So how likely do you think, with all your multi-year experience in this, and we'll talk about your experience in a second, I just wanted to start with the bottom line. So how likely do you think that this is probably the next cataclysmic clusterfuck of the energy sector that we're about to experience right now?
At this particular point, all the evidence that we have is pretty much in the same direction. And there are three critical things. The first is, I mean, the way Russia is being disintegrated at this particular point from the energy system and economy, I think this is not something that you can sort it out very easily. The second thing is, like, if you go 3 years back, it was pretty much Trump, MBS, and Putin. They pretty much can control the oil price in any direction they want. At this particular time, Putin is kind of out. We don't have Trump. And it's pretty much like one person, MBS, who has more control over OPEC. It's not a free market price, oil price. So at this particular point, until and unless someone hold it, you cannot stop it. And, you know, when oil price goes high, the inflation will jump high as well. And, you know, oil companies have become very cost efficient during the last 7-8 years decline. So suddenly now they are in a position where they can print a lot of dollars, especially the oil and gas companies which have active trading arms, which can sell futures, which they can later back with the barrels. So it's quite an opportunity for them. So at this point, energy is the biggest contribution when it comes for inflation. Okay. Any, like, for example, countries have to start deciding their own budget deficits. It is beyond what anybody has thought. So there is going to, and also, I mean, the countries will also start securing critical supplies. So the supply chain bottleneck is actually going to increase at this particular time.
I mean, you're talking about like hoarding oil at this point, like we had with the chips. It's going to exacerbate the problem, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because see, when oil price is going up, the challenge is not the price. The challenge is the supply. Countries have to think that, okay, one thing is to having it costly. Second is not to have it at all. Okay, like for example, I mean, US, we saw the news that people are flying to Venezuela to secure the supply. I mean, in paper, it looks very simple that, yeah, you can get the supply from Venezuela. In reality, not. See, Venezuelan regime has been cut by economic sanctions for a long time. People have fled Venezuela. Companies have not invested money in Venezuela. Venezuelan oil is high API, heavy oil. It's not that easy to drill and produce and scale up as you can do
Can you
in
explain what
shale.
high API means? Sorry.
So high API is like a tar, like something which is very thick. So the oil has, I mean, it has a different chemical compositions. What we call Brent. Brent is what we call, I mean, it's, if it can flow well, okay, it is less thick, better. That we call the light oil, like WTI. In Venezuela, we have a lot of reserves, but companies are not investing. Companies, there are, I mean, like for example, if you want to drill there, you need service companies. Service companies were not working there, a lot of them, because they were in the fear of sanction. So you don't have people, you don't have engineering prowess, and you do not have additional supply like Saudi have. So one thing is to go and talk to Venezuela, and then you have to first make them first untouchable, because people were against Venezuela for a long time. But bringing supplies from Venezuela in a sustainable manner will take far longer than the current mess we have. In this mess, there are only two things that can help. You need immediate release on oil supplies from somewhere. And the only place that can do at this particular point is OPEC and primarily Saudi. So any discussion we are having about Iran or any discussion we are having about Venezuela, it is more a strategic move, in my opinion, to create pressure on OPEC. But you cannot get these oil supplies as easy as people are talking, because it's not about just getting the oil. I mean, people have to physically move the containers. You need to have right. I mean, these countries are under economic sanctions, and they will want thing in return also. So at this time, if Saudi is not on board with OPEC to reduce to increase additional supply, and if I would be them, I mean, they have been in challenge for last 7-8 years. When they were first against oil shale, then they were against this whole idea that now we are moving towards energy transition, so they have to prepare for it. So they have a say now. I mean, this is what the oil industry is about. I mean, people have, and when they have balls and they have opportunity, they go big. So at this particular point, OPEC has everything going for it. So I think it is important that politicians stay more strategic rather than. I think it's better to be a bit humble to go and discuss, because unless this crisis will be quite severe.
So OPEC, which is kind of, for those of you who are not familiar, it's the oil and petroleum cartel. So do they have any incentive in helping the US government and the EU push down the prices at all?
But they also have to think in terms of sustainability. And they also do not want oil price to go in a range where the incentive to develop very expensive oil is also on the table. So the people go further in deep water, the shale oil comes back. So they want to stay strategic, because they have done it once and they lost the control to US shale oil first. So they do not want to do it in a way that it happens again. So that is first part. The second part is the US oil situation and the European situation is a bit different. See, if you see that Germany today is getting 60% or whatever percentage from its gas from Russia. So people say, let's replace it. See, it cannot be replaced. That's the ground reality. Because in order to replace the Russian gas, what Germany needs to do, like for example, if they go to the US has to dedicate a whole basin like Eagle Ford with around 25,000 wells, with all the infrastructure, all the vessels, gas terminal, LNG vessels for long term. And it will take nearly 4 to 5 years to put in place. And at that particular point, that gas will be 2 to 3 times expensive than what they are getting from Russia. So Germany is not going to do it. It's just not happening. Even if like we talk about the gas coming from Qatar and other places, it's not happening. So see, that is the challenge. When people negotiate these projects, they focus too much on the unit development cost or unit selling price. They don't go too much into the non-cash part.
The risk.
You lose because thing is like
The
it's
same thing
better
that
to
happened
have-
with chips, Sharman. Sorry,
Yeah.
Sharman. I just call it Sharman. It's Sachin and
Yeah.
why we can change your name to Sharman.
We can. I mean, I already use an alias as worth a lot of time. Okay.
We will keep it in the interview because I think it's hilarious. I just called you Sharman. It's a combination of Sachin, Sharma, and Shaman.
Yeah. At least, I mean, as long as it's not QAnon shaman, I mean, I'm okay with it.
So go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the same thing happened with chips, right, Sachin? I mean, the same fallacy of trying to drive down the cost and basically completely overlook diversification, risk management, and supply chains.
Yeah. And this is one thing which renewable industry also have to be very careful also, because the way politicians are selling renewables is that cost is going down. This is everything. If you are reducing the cost, there is something else you are trading. And what is that? And that is where a lot of time we miss. So EU has no way to come out of Russian gas in the near term timeline. There is literally no way.
What if Russia says tomorrow, because Russia knows this, right? What if Russia is in the position physically to just shut off the gas and say, well, fuck you? Can they do it? What's stopping them? I guess the question is, what's stopping Russia from doing something like that?
See, again, I mean, that what going on in Putin's head is anybody's guess at this particular point.
Yeah, of course, barring any insanity. I mean, if we're talking about rational kind of academic discussion, I mean, they just got hit hard, and if they want to, punch back, can they just shut down the gas to Europe and say, well, freeze?
They can.
And they will survive?
They will. I mean, they are already in a bad place. They will, if the things are not working for them, their cash flows are already halted. I mean, they can take this step. I mean, if people say it cannot be done, you look what OPEC does in 70s. They decided to shut supply down for world. So it can happen. I think the only thing that will matter is that if Russia wants to do it, they will think at what point they can hit the Europe maximum. Because it has to be like you do these kind of things when there is already a panic is set. You do not do these things to create panic, because nobody wants to hold in this kind of standoff for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
So when
you think the fact that they haven't done it so far means they still think there's a solution?
No, I don't think they think it's the solution, but they don't want to use this bargaining chip for now.
So it's kind of the nuclear weapon of economic warfare.
It's far worse than that. I mean, if somebody fires a nuclear missile with all the THAAD and all the frontline defense system, you can shoot it. But if somebody stops the supply of gas to you, you cannot put a compressor on the other side and suck the gas from the pipeline. You are just done.
Is it not like, I mean, look, Russia's economy is basically predominantly based on exports of energy. So if they do it, half of their and also doesn't have access to foreign reserves. They've blocked the access of the Russian National Bank. So if they do it, half of the money that they have coming in that they're supposed to survive on is gone. So they're also kind of killing themselves with the attack.
No, that's what I said. But if Russia wants to do it, they want to do it at a point where it creates sudden panic and they can bring people on table as they want. They cannot do it for a long time, but you see the way Russia has acted. I think they have sacrificed a lot of their positioning, global positioning, their economic value. So I think it has become more a gamble now rather than any well thought plan, in my opinion. So can they do it? I mean, at the end of the day, if you put somebody in a corner for too long, yeah, man, I mean, we have seen putting too much power in one person, and person is not in best of his mind. I mean, it can happen.
What would be the implications if they decide to do something like this? Obviously, we can talk about alternative solutions, but if they do it tomorrow, we don't have Iran, we don't have Venezuela. The U.S. system has basically been shut down ever since Trump left office. So what does the world do? I mean, the U.S. will be fine. They hardly import any Russian oil. I mean, like 3%. But what would the European Union do if that happens?
See, the immediate impact will be very similar to what happened in 73, 74. There will be physical. See, right now there is no shortage of gas and oil. Right now you are buying gas and oil at an expense, and it's expensive. But then it will be gone. I mean, there will be a missing supply. There will be Russians. There will be quotas by government. You saw what happened during the time of COVID. I mean, if you just cannot control the situation, you will use other means to manage how things are done. The manufacturing industry will suffer. You cannot just you cannot get your nuclear also back. So Europe, that's what I said. Europe is in a far worse place than, especially Germany, compared to where the US is. I mean, US at the end of the day, in a way that say, okay, let's go and do the shale oil. Okay, that's one way to do it. Okay, and but EU cannot do it. I mean, EU literally
the US have their own
back.
oil. US have Canada. They have friendly neighbors with oil. No problem. US will be fine.
Mexico. I mean, there's Mexico. I mean,
they're surrounded by friendly people who have a lot of oil, and they have oil of themselves if they want it. So no problem for them.
See, the situation of US is that they can get more oil both domestic and from outside. They just don't want that.
Yep.
Okay, but problem for EU is very different. They need gas, and gas from pipeline, it has a certain price which has been priced in all the manufacturing, all the supply chain, all the government budgets. So you just cannot go into a mode where suddenly it is not available and you are buying the same gas at 3 to 4 times.
But also, like, Russia can do this for an extended period, because the same, is it not like the flip side of it would be, so if Russia does this long term and says, well, we're not selling to you, it's going to take them 3, 4, 5 years to set up the infrastructure with China, which would obviously have to be the main buyer then. So they're kind of in the same position where they cannot play this game for a long time, Sachin, right?
No, I mean, Tom, you have been in Russia. I mean, you have seen like what happens if a country implodes overnight.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, so Russia is in a very difficult territory. I mean, people are suffering a lot, both in terms of their wealth has been wiped out overnight. They have no clarity in terms of their career, their family, and all the stigma that is coming at this particular point. So in long term, I hope a country sitting on that much nuke become desperate. I think one of the things which I have to honestly say is, like, I think Western world has failed to integrate Russia in a cohesive way over the last 3 decades. I mean, see, Russia had challenges coming out of USSR and coming out of the communist country, but I think more should have done from other part also to have been integrated as well. This is my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but this is how I think.
You think Germany is to blame for this, with all their fucking the shutting down the nuclear power and phasing out coal and the whole renewables? Was the renewables gamble a mistake on Germany's part? See,
renewable is the way to go. The mistake was that politicians haven't thought it thoroughly, that how we are going to do it step by step. It became a euphoria at some point of time. Okay. I mean, if you see a developed country, if you are relying with a country who is your ideological, regional, territorial, and in principle, your adversary, it's always a question of when, then if, that you will run into some sort of trouble. And they relied on this situation for 3 decades. I think they survived quite a lot, actually, without having this trouble, and people started believing that it will not happen. So it was a strategy that was based on hope than actually planning. So yeah, it's a failure.
You think, can Germany go back and restart their nuclear energy industry at all? Is this possible?
They will go back, actually, with respect to whatever they say, because at the end of the day, they need electricity. And if somebody is thinking that all the electricity will come from renewables, see, renewables can only grow at a certain pace by supply chain world. I mean, if they don't go back to nuclear, that means they are going to be in this soup for far longer than they would have thought. So I think that the choice on the table has taken from a lot of countries to go back to nuclear. They have to go back to nuclear.
So as a Russian, So before I tell you my thoughts on this, I have a very big fear from this. So technically speaking, you're the energy expert, not me. How long would it take? I mean, shutting down a nuclear system is not like turning off an oven, right? You cannot just turn the button and turn it on, right? So how long would it take Germany to reinstate their? I mean, find the employees, infrastructure, certify everything, test it out. I mean, how long is it 3-4 years? How long does it take?
I think it will take, it will definitely take more than 2 years for sure. I mean, at least to get some of it back. I think the focus should be more on new small scale nuclear plants. Okay. On one hand, you will try to bringing a lot of this old nuclear online, but you see, that is the thing with the nuclear. The engineering specifications are quite high. Okay. You need to remove even the remote chance of failure if there would be. And another thing is the stigma that comes with being nuclear. That if you go to nuclear, then
comes from the past. I've seen it happen. This traumatized my childhood. 1987 it's when I say this year, my goosebump starts on my body, bro. I'm 40 years old.
Now I can imagine, man. I mean, I have several of my European friends remember the time when the Chernobyl happened.
Dude, I talk about it, my entire body started to shake just to talk about Chernobyl. Chernobyl was it's I don't even know. So the question is, emotions aside, are we now so far removed from it that the technology? I mean, we just had TEPCO not that long ago. Again, I thought that by then so is it really that safe with Fukushima already happening, and we had the Mile High. So we had incidents over the years. It's not like it became totally accident proof. I mean, Fukushima is definitely not what you would call a contained event. It's pretty horrific.
It was. I think there are two parts of this problem. See, nuclear will always come with the stigma and this kind of complexity. We cannot remove it. Because the thing is, you can reduce the probability of the event, but whenever event happens, it's very horrific. That is one part. Okay. The second part is that we failed to actually move towards kind of modular or smaller nuclear energies. Okay, that is another thing, because what happens is, and this is what I was saying, people try to build everything on unit cost. Why nuclear plants are so big? Because you need to bring the unit cost down. Mm-hmm. But that is the thing. When you are bringing unit cost down, you are increasing the complexity of the project. And people, they kind of trade off. Because how do you say like the value of complexity, or what is the economic value of complexity? Like, for example, you saw like what happened in Australia in the LNG project that Shell was doing. I think this was $17 billion or something they invest, because the project was increased in size so much. Okay, to bring the unit cost down, it became quite a challenge in terms of engineering to manage. So there's this whole idea that people say, like, for example, I'm seeing the same thing happening in renewables. People say, oh, this is the value in terms of per unit electricity. Guys, nothing is free. When you are buying something, there is something else you are trading off. You have to be extremely clear what is that.
So yeah, it's like, I guess the best example would be, right, if you go to a restaurant and the chef makes you one steak, or you go to a dining hall where they make 50 steaks on the same serving, the quality of steak is not going to be the same. Obviously, it's the same story. The question is, how do you modularize the process so you can make 15 steaks and not one, but not 50? It will never be 50 or 100. I understand. So if that's the question, I mean, so are we? I mean, how close are we to having, beyond just obviously now everybody understands the whole renewables thing was a little bit overhyped, like the Super Bowl commercials for the EVs. These guys don't even make cars, right? And so how far are we really from a sustainable, considerable contribution from renewable energy in Western countries?
Yeah, actually, with the high oil price, what will happen now is that oil industry will have a better say what will happen in the world of renewables. Because during the time of COVID, what I call like a big oil, that all the major oil and gas companies, they have made commitments and moved towards moving to big energy. So what will happen now is that when the oil price is going to be high, the world from big oil is actually going to be translated into big energy. That means they have a better say what constitutes low carbon or zero carbon energy. Okay, what, like for example, oil and gas industry have shown specific preference to offshore wind because it requires offshore maritime experience, it requires mega capital project. So offshore wind is gonna get bigger than what it is today. On the European side as well as on the US side, there is only one technology in low carbon that everybody is focusing, is that is carbon capture. Okay, now why carbon capture? Because if you want to capture carbon and put it back into the subsurface, the engineering is simply like oil and gas. I mean, what you need in oil and gas, and if you are doing in addition with oil and gas project, you subsidize the cost. So the world of big energy is going to be very similar to what is big oil. And the loser in this game are the innovative and the small renewable companies, because oil and gas is now flushed with cash and they want to go to energy overall, and they have not invested that much in the past. So they are going to go into the buying spree. That let's try to acquire, like for example, if you see the case of CFS, which is Commonwealth Fusion System, a company that came out of MIT. And if you start seeing like who are the investors, you will see ENI and Equinor as an investor there. Okay, so that is one thing. Like for example, in the world of big energy, I mean, and you know, renewable companies are not global companies in general. They are regionally they are strong, like companies like Ørsted, but like Shell is present globally. Shell has been present globally for hundreds of years. They have connections, they have brand recognition, they have lobbyists. I mean, people know them. So for them to work out regulators and everything around, so the world will move towards renewable and low carbon energy at a pace that is defined by big oil moving forward.
Only when it makes sense for them, it will happen, because they control all the money and all the politicians and all the regulators.
See, if you have so much gas sitting on the world's balance sheet, like there are so many companies with so much reserve sitting on the balance sheet, and they are the one who are in position to define how to move it. I mean, it makes a lot of sense for them to ensure whatever economic value they can get out of it.
So it might be decades away until we see any significant contribution from renewables, if that's the case, because they have plenty of gas and oil.
See, I mean, purely from engineering point of view, there are two problems to be sorted out first. The first problem is that the large scale renewables needs a lot of capacity in terms of supply chain and manufacturing, which is yet to come. Okay, you cannot work large scale renewables in a grid and utility system. But we have, you need distributed grids and you need storage. If you cannot get these two things working at very large scale, you just cannot move substantially to renewables. For countries like India and China, I mean, it is very important to make this change, because in the war of this energy, like for example, what is happening between you, they are the losers, because they don't get to control it. They have say.
They don't have any energy independence.
They don't have any energy independence. So see, the move to renewable is likely going to happen because it makes a lot of sense for a lot of countries to change the geopolitical map. And it makes sense for big oil to move to big energy. So my view is like the energy transition is going to accelerate, but with the specific agendas moving forward.
So, quick question for you. If right now is a game of trying to politically leverage the West, is trying to leverage Putin is trying to leverage the West, since we know that we don't have an alternative, and since we know, like, because I've been hearing some morons, some pseudo specialists on YouTube explaining, well, Russia won't have fucking Audis and Prada handbags, but we won't have energy, so we're fucked. Well, my guy, Russia needs the oil money as bad as we need the fucking oil and gas, so they don't have anybody to sell it to. The capacity in which they can sell to China is very limited. It's going to take years and years. So it's pretty much a Mexican standoff. Both of us are standing with the gun and we're going to kill each other or not. So the question is, since we both don't have alternatives, is energy even a consideration right now, as far as I mean, if you know that neither side can push the button, how does this thing play out? Because I look at this and I say, well, if one guy, in a fight, when you have like an even fight, usually the crazier guy win. The
I
one that's
agree.
willing, you know what I mean? That's what scares me
Yeah.
the most about this.
See, this is what I mean. Like, if you see the world and the era, like especially post World War, uh, politicians managed to bring some very difficult parties on the same table to discuss some very sensitive matters. Okay, this is what we are missing at this particular point. I mean, see, we can criticize Putin as much we like. I mean, and I despise a lot of things he's doing, but the reality is that he is in control of Russian army and Russia at this particular moment. And if you want to resolve, so the idea is, are we going to cut our losses and bring these parties on table? That means at that particular time, we need to give something to Putin also so that he can have an honorable exit. If I'm right, in Russian culture, you cannot make leader look weak internally. I mean, Putin cannot go back to Russia and say that, yeah, I made a deal and we actually lost so much value. He has to show why it has all been done. So that is something which is entirely missing at this particular point.
And
We
given the
like
fact that
it.
it's not close, obviously there's not, it doesn't seem like it's, I don't want to make any predictions. We don't obviously know, right? But it doesn't seem like they're in the, I mean, when you want, when you come out of war to negotiation, somebody always tried to get better position before. So right now
Yeah.
he's in total shit. It's not it's coming to negotiation from weakness. He's not going to want to do it. So he needs something to come with. So assuming we don't have negotiations soon, and assuming that he's going to do something in the middle. Let's say that he doesn't shut down the gas supply to Europe, but let's say he starts to fuck with it. You know what I mean? Give them one third less. That's enough to completely fuck with their lives, bro. Just put it by 30%, you create insanity, right? Can the US and their allies, at least on an emergency kind of layout, compensate for that to prevent a catastrophe in Europe, or would this be game over?
For Europe, no. I mean, they can supply 10-20% by mobilizing whatever in the spot LNG worldwide. But that's I said that Europe has no escape. There is no way Europe can come out of it without Russian energy.
Did
US
he wait
can.
too long, Sachin? If he does this 2 months ago, and the winter is almost over, so he has lesser leverage, no?
I mean, technically, I mean, that's how it seems from outside in point, but what were his challenge? What was going on internally in his troops and in his, I mean, Russia internally, it's very difficult to say that the timing and what triggered it. And my view is that he waited, that he really wanted Western countries to come on the table and provide him an honorable or probably lucrative option to not to go into the war, which did not happen. And I mean, politicians nowadays are spending more time on Twitter than actual diplomacy. So people have made Putin a pariah in all sense. So for politicians, it becomes very difficult to go and talk to him now, because then they look bad to their voters. So the consideration of voting is actually kind of having a higher precedence over the international diplomacy.
So if that's the case, I mean, is buying oil at, I mean, because when I think of oil, right, all the experts are saying, well, 130 is where we're pricing in zero oil from Russia. Is this true or not? Because I've heard this on Twitter.
No.
What's the point of price point for zero complete short stoppage from Russia?
See, the oil will keep on increasing, even if there is no fixed floor. And reason for that is there are three reasons.
What do you mean, like
that.
150, 160, 170? There's no.
There is no cap, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
See, oil supply is not something which is fixed. If you have an infrastructure, the oil produces and it keeps on declining, so you need to add more capacity to replace it. Okay, so Russian oil is not going Russian. The Russian capacity of adding more oil is also going away when you take this stand. The second thing is that oil and gas companies have not invested enough in last 2 years to maintain oil and gas. So oil and gas is already under strain to maintain outside Russia what it is doing. Okay, the OPEC is the only place that can add capacity, and currently the US administration and their relationship with OPEC is not working out very well. Okay, so it's not like if anybody says that 130 is the price at which no Russian oil, no, that's in my view, that's not right. If it is 130 today, it will be tomorrow 135. And oil price is a self-killing prophecy. If you tell everyone that oil is going for 200, people will end up buying 5 times than they should have been, and then it collapses. So it's a dynamic market.
You buying energy right now at all? Are you
No,
in the commodities market?
I cannot buy energy because, since I help clients for energy and also my confidentiality and NDAs, I was checking this morning, but I cannot at this particular point. So I work in energy for almost like 18 plus years now. I came to work as a physicist and engineer. My background was math physics. Then I did masters in geophysics, my postgraduate diploma in petroleum engineering. I also have a diploma in environmental and ecology. I had my rebel phase for green energy guy in the late 90s before I joined this job. So I spent nearly 14 years in Schlumberger. Okay, and I was in the division that used to be called Schlumberger Production Management, where we used to manage the oil and gas field. So that means I was in charge of a lot of mega capital project where you design the project and you go to banks for like final investment decisions for $1 billion plus. So I did this kind of projects in India, in Malaysia, Southeast Asia, in Nigeria. So I get to live with the oil price reality on day-to-day basis. And after that, like I did my MBA, I moved to Boston Consulting because I wanted to move towards broader energy than oil and gas. I helped clients, which includes all the large companies in digital oil, in energy transition. These are like two of my favorite topics to work with. So large companies, NOCs, regulators, governments, banks, people who are lending money or who are somehow exposed to oil prices. These are like my clients. As of today, I have my own boutique consulting. I'm trying to establish a couple of SaaS products. I'm a fund advisor to an ESG fund in Singapore. I'm still expert advisor with a tier 1 consulting. And whenever they need me, I work with them. I help a couple of business education consulting companies in UK, which in turn helps some of the large business schools to navigate their students that how to build a career in energy. I help a lot of people nowadays, which is my passion, is that how to transition from oil and gas to renewable. So that's pretty much where I spend most of my time.
So your phone is probably ringing off the hook right now with everything that's going on.
It is pretty bad.
So what's the most common questions you're getting right now without telling us clients? What's the type of questions that people want to ask you now as an expert in the industry?
So the question I received over the weekend, almost like, I think 40 plus messages or call, is like how high the oil price can go.
I asked this as well.
Yeah. And like I said, until and unless there is an intervention, it's not going to stop. It's an inelastic price. See, even if you see from a futures trading point of view, you have a difference in the calendar price as future contracts are forward. So there are so many calendar strategies are at display at this particular point that it's very difficult to contain the price at this point. And this is in a very inelastic range. So the moves are very sharp.
Last time we hit 145, the economy and the stock market collapsed, not because of the oil, but it was kind of one more, contributing factor. We had the big real estate collapse in 2008. But when you have these sort of pricing levels, it's almost like when your body is telling you that something wrong, the market is telling you that something is really flawed. Because, it's not like the prices were $40 now jumped to 120. The prices were high before the invasion, right? We were talking at $90. So do you think that's part of the reason he decided to do this now, with how energy was already kind of running hot and the inflation pressures? Like, do you think he strategically chose this time because to get the most leverage out of this?
I don't think so. See, the reason is like, even if the US is flooded with oil, and even if the oil price is 25, the dependence of Europe on Russian gas is still as much as it is today.
So his leverage is. So were you surprised by how Germany reacted, given the fact that they're calling his bluff, so to speak, like that?
Yeah, the way EU has acted, like for example, first they flirted with the idea that they want to bring Ukraine in European Union without thinking it thoroughly. See, if Putin is a stakeholder in the European relationship and European like a geopolitical balance, then yeah, I mean, you like it or you don't like it, but you need to kind of bring him on board also that this move is not going to hurt him. Okay, this is not an easy conversation. It's not like somebody, a teenager in a politics, and go say, oh, we should do this. Okay, I mean, it's a very complicated place to be. So people have started treating that this person cannot be touched, this country cannot be touched, this commodity cannot be touched, and then you create these distances that you just cannot cross it. So yeah, suffering is brought onto them.
But I mean, like the fact that when he started this, so I think his assumption was, and I said this in my video, which I think you mentioned you watched. I think the assumption was that Germany would not be able to confront because of the fear of losing the gas, and yet they chose to confront. So is this something that it's strange for you to see that they take this gamble, given the fact that the risk of loss is horrific for them?
So there are two views on this. The one view is that that on one part, the Germany has calculated well, because they thought that Russia will not do this because the kind of damages it will brought to them. So if Germans were thinking from that view that Putin is bluffing, okay, then yeah, this move could have been well. But the thing is, if you are expecting to caught others bluff, then you need to have substance in yourself also, because they were also bluffing.
They have nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, of course they have no. Yeah.
So I mean, it became more a issue of resilience, that who calls each other's bluff.
But so far we have twice already. We have the Germany calling his bluff, and we have US calling his bluff on the nuclear readiness, where he said the nuclear readiness, and it's like, okay, you remember that? So two bluffs. Yeah. Is it now getting too dangerous when you call too many bluffs? Eventually you get shot.
Actually, it is. I mean, see, the thing is, how to trust, European Union intention or US intention when they are not able to back it up? I mean, of course, I mean, they are helping in terms of humanitarian needs. Okay, but that is the part of Western democracy and Western culture. It's not a part of Western governments. Okay, they cannot just go and say, okay, we are not helping. But they are helping humanitarian. It should not be misunderstood that they haven't failed. They have failed on foreign policy and strategy in this issue. That's why Ukrainians are suffering today. And they are still not able to force or create situations where they can bring Russia on table to negotiate. So it is a failure of diplomatic channels. I mean, even in the worst Cold War crisis, countries were able to have, you remember, I mean, I think you remember the hotline discussions in the Cold War era, that people from US will have a direct line to the Russian president, and the same vice versa. And these channels were created because they knew that there are times when we need to talk directly with each other, despite we like it or we don't like it. That is missing.
What do you say to people who are now looking at this, and obviously a lot of people will be looking to take advantage of this in the stock market and the commodities market? I mean, do you think that this might create a feeding frenzy that's going to spiral this out of control on the market side, not just on the supply side? You think there's a risk that all these Bitcoin, shitcoin idiots are going to fucking drive the prices up to the sky? Is this a possibility?
See, oil players are quite bigger than the altcoin and shitcoin domain. I mean, oil price is going to have. See, I have been in this industry for.
These are sharks.
Years.
These are not kids.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. So, and you know what is my longest or largest losing trade? I lost very high 6-figure sum in oil. Somebody like me, because the reason is that now it's not about demand and supply. Demand and supply is overarching narratives. But tomorrow, somebody comes up and tweets something. Okay, who has control? The market changes overnight. And if you are trading, for example, in ETS, which is, I mean, either USO or leverage ETS like UC or SCO, what happens is that you cannot trade it outside market hours. If a decision has changed in the Asian hours, you are just caught in middle of anything. You just cannot.
You asleep when this
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So the exposure is quite large in these kind of situations. And a lot of people will jump because that's what we have seen happen with GME, AMC, and other thing, that oil is the next thing. But yeah, oil can burn you far worse than
It
altcoin
does
and
not behave
shitcoin
like
can do.
stocks. People forget oil can go to
Yeah.
zero tomorrow, and it has completely volatile life cycle. It's very different from stocks. I will just say my 2 cents. If you're not a commodities trader, if you're not in energy, stay the fuck away from this because you don't know what you're playing with. It's a very dangerous game. Not saying
Oil
that you
trading
can't
is
make money, but I mean, if it's like a playing with the gun, very
Yeah.
dangerous.
Oil trading is best suited for people who have physical barrels to back it up. So, for example, if you are in US today and you say that, okay, I can actually produce 10,000 barrels in 6 months. Okay, so you go to your contractor and you say, I need a drilling rig, I need a fracking unit, this is my cost. And then you start selling futures on a certain date. So you have your revenue, you have kind of trimmed your upside, but it's an arbitrage for you in these kind of situations. You have your cost, you know what your revenue will look like, and
You
you
have
have an
certainty.
actual barrel, you have certainty. So basically what happens is that you actually remove volatility. And this is what people missed in shale oil. People said that shale oil is expensive, so it's not disruptive, because disruptive things have to be cheaper. That's what the theory is. Yeah, shale oil was expensive, but then what happened was you were in the US era, which is flooded with the QE money. So you have a lot of cheap credit, you have a short cash cycle, you have limited cash exposure, and then you have certainty in terms of future selling. So when you try to look back in terms of risk adjusted returns of shale oil in 2009, 2010 versus an LNG project that is going to take 9 years to develop, shale oil was cheaper. And that is exactly why, because people were looking on the unit development cost. And I know this very well. Schlumberger CEO, Andrew Gold, I mean, one of the person I admired a lot, he said that it is one of his biggest regret of his life, that how he missed it. He just couldn't understand the dynamics in time. And by the time everybody else understood the dynamics, it was out of everybody's hand.
It's tough. Everybody's smart in hindsight. In real time, I can understand why people sometimes it's hard to see, especially when think about it this way. Like, I mean, for the past few years, it's not sexy enough. Everybody was on the EV, on the renewables. Nobody was. I mean, it's too boring. It's nobody really like. Everybody was looking for the next big explosive thing, right?
So we are in an energy transition mode, but we have not yet replaced even the 2% of world energy needs. See, the thing is, it's the energy demand is also increasing. So renewables are capturing very well the increasing demand of energy, but they are not reducing the existing demand of energy.
Germany and the EU basically saying, well, we're out, renewables all the way. Like, what were they thinking, bro? There was not somebody like you, like an advisor, to say, hey, guys, we're not even anywhere close to this. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
See, I get to be in meetings with it's like certain regulators, and we talk things. We try to be very realistic, like what is possible or not, but then you realize that certain thoughts are not welcome. Okay, like for example, I mean, in one of the discussion in one of the project, and I was trying to explain, I said, see, in a world where both European majors and US major inject a lot of money on carbon sequestration and it becomes a thing, and they certify it for carbon trading. And if you're not investing in your country in it, the one challenge is that means your carbon credit certificates are going to be expensive than those. Who is going to buy it? So it's not like what I want. It's you need to, like, strategic thinking is you are going from point A to point B. What needs to happen to make this journey go through? And if one of these things doesn't happen, then you're not going to point B, you're going to point C. And what is that point C? So it becomes a more a desire kind of thing that I want this to happen.
Serves the narrative of everybody who says renewables is a scam because they did the opposite. In fact,
they definitely get the opportunity. I think people who are pushing larger scale renewable project, they have made a strategic mistake. Okay, I mean, people have not done this kind of projects at this scale, so they are facing challenges. They have questions which needs to be answered. So they have to come up honestly and say, okay, we are sorting it out. Another challenge, what is happening is, and like we discussed, that in order to push renewables, people are pushing a lot more on unit cost. So this project has this much unit cost. And like we discussed, it's okay to have a project with higher unit cost if it is a flexibility inbuilt in that. So people are not talking about the flexibility or the grid requirements that needs to take. They simply say, oh, government needs to invest this. And when it comes for government to invest money and subsidize, yeah, governments are not best for capital deployment. It's better it is done by private sector.
Well, look, Sachin, we can do this all day. I know you're a busy guy. Thank you for doing this. I'm going to try and get it out as fast as I can for people to kind of get an insight into what's going on. I think my main conclusion from this, whenever I talk to real experts, I come off more confused because the reality is not so black and white and simple and like the mainstream media wants us to think. So when you talk to an actual expert, you basically say, well, this is a complex situation. That's not so easy just to, solve it with a few, this goes there, and then, so I definitely appreciate the insight. I hope you're right and they can figure it out because I think eventually, at least in our lifetime, financial interest usually wins. I hope this continues to happen.
I hope so. I mean, my idea is like this, that people have currently issues with their egos and position, that they don't want to talk to each other. Oil price will keep on rising until and unless somebody breaks. So that's what I say. The oil price is not going to stop until someone's resolve is actually broken. Who is going to be that person? I think I would expect it's so. I mean, this is also like politicians also have to think that eventually they are going to retract back. So why not earlier than later?
Sachin, thank you so much. Let's do it again real soon. Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure. If people want to find you on the internet, I know you have a YouTube channel. You want to give us a little bit about your YouTube channel, and then I'll put it on the screen when I post the video.
Yeah, I mean, see, I was a kind of a person who was groomed to go in corporate world. So I was like kind of a 10 years quiet period on social media. I mean, people who are supposed to go higher in career, they don't post things in social media because it can come back to bite them. So that's how I used to be. But during my time in COVID, I started learning more and more from community. Okay. And I also realized that people like who have experience like me or who are working close to different companies, they generally don't talk on social media. Or so that was my point of trigger. I thought, why don't I do it? Okay. And so I like talking about companies I like friends. I mean, energy is something which is very passionate for me. I mean, companies like Palantir, Tesla, I mean, Klarna, SpaceX. I'm heavily invested in many of these. Not Tesla at this particular point because I moved everything in Palantir. I'm going to convert my Indian account in Tesla most likely soon because now Tesla can be traded on Indian exchanges. SpaceX. I mean, I'm fascinated about technology, and yeah, I think that's my passion. Is I'm technically semi-retired, so getting more time to invest on and spend on these activities as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna put the link to your channel in the description so that people can go and subscribe to your channel. I mean, this guy's the real deal. If you want to hear some actual insight from somebody who knows what the fuck they're talking about, not the most professional looking channel or sounding. I mean, but you're not a media expert, but you definitely know what the fuck you're talking about for engineering, for data, for energy. I mean, this guy's the real deal. I highly recommend you guys subscribe to him. This has absolutely been a blast. Thank you so much, Sachin. This has been an honor and a privilege. Thank you for coming on and sharing your insights.
And Tom, really appreciate, and thanks for encouraging me, because I think you were one of the person along with I think Meet Kevin, a couple of other people I was spending a lot of time watching during COVID. And despite like you don't agree with people all the time, but I think the community is far better with you being sharing things on media, and people like me also got kind of encouraged to share. So really appreciate that, man.
Thank you so much, Sachin, and I'll see you soon, buddy.